coming up on the Lead Ministry Podcast.
But there are these weird expectations that your family or your in-laws have, and we had to make a decision early on. We are going to make decisions that are going to make memories and traditions for our family. We're not going to necessarily carry on traditions for my old nuclear family.
And now your host, Josh Denhart.
Hey, welcome back to the Lead Ministry Podcast. We're kind of in holiday season and we're talking about some unique things about holidays. And we want to make sure that you know that we've been there and we understand that extra services during the holidays are definitely extra for you. Often when, people at the bank or people at some other random job, what do they have to think about? Wow, how am I going to squeeze in my family along with the one-time Christmas party on a Saturday night? Okay, go get a babysitter. But in ministry, you actually have a whole bunch of extra services. And, I think we had like 7 Christmas Eve services or something absurd like that. Hey, Bill, good to see you, buddy. We're talking today about making sure that we're managing the holiday season and we're not crushing our family.
Yeah, this is such an important topic. And it's one of those things where people outside of ministry don't really realize the cost involved in this piece of it. That you're focused on church and family family at home kind of feels like, where's my parent? Where's my spouse?
Yes, it's actually almost second. Right. So we're going to talk about that today. So this is the Lead Ministry Podcast. We want to help you lead in ministry in such a way that allows you to do this for the long haul and allows you to do this in a way that doesn't crush your kids. Well, if you're only listening to the podcast audio, then you're missing out on some of the extra special holiday lights and the legitimate falling snow that's happening on the screen right now. So just something kind of fun. So that encourages you to go check it out on YouTube. Well, what we're talking about today is how to manage holidays in ministry. It is a thing. The idea that we have special services that we do want our families to come to. And like I said, I think we had 7 Christmas Eve services. We had it on the 23rd. This one buddy of mine called it Christmas Adam and Christmas Eve.
And
then Christmas Day.
Yes.
Christmas Adam, Christmas Eve, and Christmas Day. And every once in a while, Thanksgiving Day the 25th would land on a Sunday morning.
Yes.
And then it's like, what? Like everybody, like we had 4 main services or 3 main services. Well, we went down to 1 because we knew that a whole bunch of families were like, I'm not coming to church on Sunday morning on Christmas Day. That's going to jack with my family tradition. Well, for those random people who were like, well, it's Sunday, we're not going to not go to church. Well, the staff had to be there for those people, even if we would never have taken a Sunday. You see, I mean, there's a different expectation. And what you said is quite important, Bill. What you said was your average regular person just doesn't understand.
Yes, it's true. Yeah. Yeah, we have the same thing in our church. Like I've been through many of these now where when Christmas falls on a Sunday, it's like, it's always a debate. What do we do? And we finally did something different this last time around. I think it was a couple years ago now. But what we did was we did a special video message from our pastor on Christmas Day. And then we just had our regular Christmas Eve services. It worked out really well.
Yeah. And by the way, COVID really was terrible for all of us, but it did open the door to options like this. Like, okay, at least our people have experienced this before, because before COVID, it would have been like, what? What do you mean a video? What? We don't know how to do church at home. You do now.
Yep. I like it. Yeah. We actually recorded our senior pastor at his house, and we had ladies from the church come and like professionally decorate his house. So it was like, kind of like, I don't know, those Chip and Joanna Gaines Christmas, that's the style. And they decked out his house. And then we did like a whole bunch of videos of him like in his living room next to the Christmas tree, made it very nostalgic.
Sure.
And people said they loved it. They were like, yeah, that was great. We all gathered on the couch instead of going to church on Sunday morning, and we just watched the senior pastor point us towards Jesus on Christmas.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. And all you really needed to do was to go to Target and sit down in the Chip and Joanna Gaines little display area. I was literally at Target just the other night with my kids. It was funny, right? We were getting ready to watch a movie, and my 14-year-old son, man, he's the baby. He gets whatever he wants. It's absurd. Okay, let's just put it out there. And he was like, well, we need treats. And I said, no, we're not getting any treats. And of course, we went and got treats, right? So we walked by the Chip and Joanna Gaines thing, and I was like, drama. They're kind of a situation here. So, but really, we're talking, right? Aren't they?
Yep.
But what you're saying is that you can make a very sentimental, very memory stacked thing and not have it crush your staff. Now, the church that I go to right now, I am not on staff there, but I was an elder for 5 years and whatnot. So I was very involved in the leadership. And I have a lot of respect for the senior pastor because he went to a big church, basically the first cousin of the church that I went to. So it's the same denomination, just like 5 hours away. And there were so many similarities. And he is making a different value judgment on how we're going to do stuff. We do a big Christmas Eve thing at our church, and it is decked out. It is cute. It is fun, but there is nobody. No matter if it falls on a Sunday or not. So he's making some value judgments that is kind of in response to what he and I both experienced, right? So
yeah.
I can appreciate that. So again, how to manage ministry in the holidays? Well, I put it as your family versus your job. You see, your job as a ministry leader, as we've talked about earlier, it's different than the person who is working at the bank. And the one extra thing is the office Christmas party that some people actually do over lunch during the day so that they don't have to stack it on a weekend with everybody else's stacked calendar in the holidays. And so that's just not the reality for us as ministry leaders. Your job your family in this particular case has to fit in with your job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's going to look different than a normal family.
That's right.
And I think the other piece that you kind of have to realize with that is that often affects not just your immediate family, but it can also affect your extended family who doesn't understand this dynamic at all.
Preach that. So for instance, for years and years and years, there was, and by the way, we're not even going to get into like the expectation. That's another whole podcast. That's like the family dynamics podcast, not the lead ministry podcast, right?
Right.
But,
yep.
but there are these weird expectations that your family or your in-laws have. And we had to make a decision early on. We are going to make decisions that are going to make memories and traditions for our family. We're not going to necessarily carry on traditions for my old nuclear family.
Yes, that's true.
And so, to be honest with you, I know my parents don't listen to this podcast, so I can get away with this. But in a sense, Bill, it was almost a helpful excuse for us to go, ooh, sorry, we can't come to your traditional Christmas Eve thing because of my job, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it can be a good, unique opportunity for a ministry family to say, hey, parents of these families, like, you guys get to decide what your traditions are. Like, make you and your wife get together and decide, what do we want our family traditions to be?
Yes.
And then you can consider your job in that and your responsibilities in that.
That's exactly right. There are extra things. And by the way, this is something that I think is extremely important that I leaned into, Bill, and I got into. And this was part of, it was not like a consolation prize. It was actually a beautiful thing. And I basically determined in my mind, okay, time out. I am personally, when I get up on stage every single Christmas Eve service and I do a super unique, very memorable children's message, very memorable. I mean, like I put serious time and serious thought. I did like elaborate, like gospel-centered illusions that blew people's minds, or I would do like this ultra cool chemistry thing. And people legitimately looked forward to what I was doing. Yep. And there was like a rhythm to our Christmas Eve service. And I was a major, major, major part of that. Well, I determined in my mind, okay, there are families out there and I am part of their tradition.
Yes. Yep.
I am part of them making sure that they're having their memories. Like I'm like, okay, this family always comes and the dad wears this like, dark blue velour sport coat. You know what I mean? And,
yes.
And everybody's all dressed up and they had a super special dinner before Christmas Eve. And this Christmas Eve is part of their forever and ever and ever memory. And I am a critical piece to that. So I didn't, in order to kind of, and I never had bitterness about it, but in order to kind of combat the idea that this was robbing me, I viewed it as a ministry opportunity. This is somebody else's great memory.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great way to frame that.
Yeah. And by the way, I can't overemphasize how much effort and energy I put into legitimately blowing it out of the water. I'm talking big stuff, right? Because I wanted it to be fun too. And so I would actually stretch myself. And I had a very limited, I don't need to make this all about what I did for Christmas Eve, but I had a limited window and I was like, okay, blow the doors off. One time I had this like package and as I lifted the lid off, smoke came out and it turned on LEDs inside. And so it was like this glowing gift that came out. It was whatever.
That's cool.
So I had a lot of chemistry things and a lot of like gospel illusions that were supreme and over the top. So you got to consider your job and your ministry. Now, speaking of your job, every job has unique job hazards. Okay, Bill, throw out a random job. I'm going to try to do my best. Give me a softball here.
Electrician.
Ooh, if you're an electrician, a job hazard is that you're going to have 220 volts of electricity accidentally surging through your body. That is not one that I, Josh, as a ministry leader, ever really had to consider as a job hazard.
Right.
That's unique. That's a unique job hazard to somebody who is an electrician. And when you stood in that line, you probably had to think through, dude, do I really like getting shocked? Because that's probably going to happen.
Right. It's so true.
Okay. So I'll give you one, Bill. Over the country, long 18-wheeler trucker. What's your job hazard?
Oh, man. Accidents, car accidents, breaking down on the highway.
Right? Like you travel for a living. You've got to deal with other stupid drivers on the road.
All the time. Yes.
And being gone from your family. So that is a unique job hazard. And by the way, I know some over long haul truckers. They make serious money. Mm-hmm. They really do. I mean, if you get into the right gig, you're making serious money. So that's fine. But there are hazards that come with that job. If you work in a construction, you forget your hard hat, your brain could get smashed. You know what I mean? Whatever.
Right.
As a ministry leader, I have a different set of job hazards. And what we're talking about today is one of those job hazards as you stood in the line to be a ministry leader is you are central to special services. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Your family a little bit for that time when those services are going, they take a little bit of a back seat to what you need to do for ministry. Yes.
And so I think I always reminded my people and I always reminded myself, every job has their job hazards. And by the way, yours isn't this one. Yours isn't 220 volts. Yours just happens to be this one. It happens to be that that normal Christmas Eve traditions you have to be creative. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
And you have to factor this into the cost counting, right? Count the cost. You decided to stand in this line. You decided to uniquely spend your one and only unique life to further the gospel. This is part of that cost.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I just think some of that is attitude though when it comes to understanding that, where you have to go, okay, yes, this is true, and you could go down the rabbit hole of being
Woe is
bitter
me.
or
Yep.
being resentful or saying like, oh, I have to do this and all these other families don't get what I want and da 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 da. Or you could say, how can I look at this and, like you said, be creative, and I would also add to that, be intentional with the time we do have. How can I make this special despite the fact that I'm gone for a big portion of the day on Christmas Eve?
That's exactly right. And so this one here, I call it special traditions for the special services. So you got these special services. Bill, what did you do unique as a family to kind of offset the idea that you were held captive? And again, that's obviously very negative language. We're trying to stay away from the negative language. We're trying to spin it positively, but you were held captive, and so was I for 6 or 7 Christmas Eve services. How did you manage that?
Yeah, we still do this actually. What we do is we have basically one gift that we like to open when I get done with Christmas Eve services. So we start early in the day on Christmas Eve as a church. We do 6 or 7 services as well. And when I get home in the evening, later in the evening, my kids are like super pumped because Dad's coming home. We're going to sit down. We're going to open a special gift. And we've done different things. We've said everyone's getting the same pajamas, right? And we all open pajamas. Sometimes it's when Dad gets home, we're going to watch The Grinch together, or when Dad gets home, we're going to do this together. So we made it special that, hey, yeah, Dad has to work today. But when he gets home, we're going to spend, intentional time together as a family celebrating an aspect of Christmas.
Absolutely. And so guess what? Your kids know no different. They don't understand that everybody else has a different Christmas Eve experience.
Right. Absolutely.
They don't know that anybody else. What you've done, though, is that you've made it unique and special for your family. And so the idea that, okay, hang on, let's get this party started. Dad's home. That's the memory. That's what they're going to remember. And so it comes down to us as parents having enough reserves in our tank after the 7 Christmas Eve services that we've endured and that we've served at and that we've helped other people have memories for their families. Then we have enough extra margin to do something cool and unique and special for our family.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the things that we did, Bill, around these special traditions for us, all these special services, is that when I would get home, my wife would have the homemade pizza dough already on its final rise, right? It does 2 rises. You'd make the pizza dough. It kind of rises. You smash it. You let it do its second rise so that by the time I got home, the pizza had risen the second time. Everybody got their own lump. Everybody made their own pizza. We had all of the ingredients. And yes, we listened to the Avalon Christmas. Remember that group Avalon back in the day, like the 90s Christian band? What happens to be like one of my favorite albums. And so we would put it on. And so hear me out real quick. Like I do get emotional when I hear that Avalon Christmas album because it has associations with our special thing. So everybody would make their own pizza. We would eat the pizza, whatever. And then Christmas Day, of course, we had our own special, unique traditions where we would read the Christmas story out of the kids' Bible, even if our kids were older, all of these different things. So it's about being intentional. And I think now, Bill, you mentioned something that was important that I think is worthy of notation, that you did something or you watched something unique recently that was bringing in key volunteers and making a tradition around the holiday. So kind of talk about that.
Yeah. So this is a cool thing that our student ministry does for the leaders. So, it gets really busy even around Thanksgiving. It starts to get busy. People are shopping, all of those things. And so for the last Wednesday before Thanksgiving, they have it catered, okay? But they bring in the full Thanksgiving meal for the leaders and they invite them to come early to church and they do kind of a Friendsgiving. And what it allows the leaders to do is it kind of goes along with our previous episode on appreciation. It allows the leaders to sit around to enjoy a Thanksgiving dinner with each other and shows that like, hey, we value you, and here's how we're valuing you. We're providing this meal and time together.
Mm-hmm. For sure. To boot, what I would do if I was that leader doing the Friendsgiving is that I would bring in all of their families, right? And so
Yes.
My kids years ago, we would do this very unique thing in the summers. Well, we did it 4 times a year. It wasn't always in the summer, but the summer one was always fun because we would bring in every volunteer who was a key volunteer in key places and their families and all of the ministry families and our kids. And we would play barefoot kickball and we would have, a good food and we would hang out together all night long. We did it on a Friday night and a Saturday night. We did it once a quarter. And so there were times that it was during the winter months. But at the end of the day, when I quit my job at the church after a decade to do what I'm doing now, my then 12-year-old daughter had hard tears and cried really hard because she was like, this means that we're no longer going to do the dinners at Miss Amy's house. So, right? So, it wasn't a forced family fun.
Yes.
That my daughter had to go to. This was a real thing it was a privilege and it was a tradition for her. And so what if you did a ministry family dinner that was unique and special and only the insiders who pull serious weight get to come to this? Your kids are going to have that as a special memory, right?
Yeah, I love that. And you kind of have to think about like when your kids look back, is it something you touched on? This is so good. Is it something you forced your family to do? Or is this something that added value to your ministry family because they got to be part of it? And I think as a parent of, a ministry family, we have to continually point out to our kids all the benefits of being part of a ministry family. Like we get to do all these things. We get Friendsgiving. We get all these extra things,
Yes. And even though I didn't frame it that way, my excitement about quarterly dinners at Amy's house, and my excitement by itself bled over to my kids going, this is awesome.
Yeah.
That she even cried at the end of it. But I got to say, there is a piece as we close off this particular podcast about how to manage the holidays if you're a ministry family is setting boundaries, right? Maybe I could tee up everything in such a way that, and I'm creative enough that I know how to not be at church all day long. I know when my time slots are going to be. And so on the Christmas Adam, not the Christmas Eve, of course, because we had it on the 23rd and on the 24th, that I could somehow creatively manage. That I had all of my business pulled together, that I wasn't scurrying around on the 23rd or the 24th, so that I could do just the amount that was necessary, right? Or it's as the staff is having their discussion about whether or not to have Christmas Day services, that I throw up a serious red flag and say, hey, I got to let you know, if you force me, I think I'll do it. But I'm reserved. I might actually say, I'm sorry, it's not happening for us. And, it depends on your church leadership structure. It depends on if you could even think about getting away with such a thing. But after I was there a long time and I was more of a senior leader, my voice mattered.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Use your influence to help protect other families and setting those boundaries.
And it's protecting mine, but it is protecting others. Now, I got to say that, if you're listening to this and you're a part of the creative arts ministry or the worship team or something like that, hey, man, this is a unique job hazard that's special for you. And the children's guy or the youth guy, they just have to stand in the atrium and kind of glad hand people and smile. And that's really it, right? But if you're on the worship team, this is full send, full commitment. And so I remember back in the day, and I really did appreciate this, that the worship team, they did have, and they did make this a very unique and special thing. So in this like pseudo green room, our church didn't really have a green room, but they had a pseudo green room. They would bring all of the little fingery Christmas fixins and all the eats and all this stuff. Yep. And all of their families were there and they were all dressed up and they all just hung out behind stage, even if they weren't on stage. And so then, Because what does the worship team do, right? They're the bookends. They open the service, then they come and close the service. And then you got to open the next service and close the next service. But you got this big pocket in the middle. And so then they made it kind of a fun family experience for everybody. So you just got to be creative. Amen?
Amen. Yes. Bring those cocktail weenies.
Yes, bring the cocktail weenies. That's exactly right. Well, listen, at the end of the day, what we're wanting you to do is to learn how to lead in a ministry context. And it is a unique thing to lead through the holidays. And so that's what we're seeking to do. So comment on here if you have a unique thing, or email us and tell us a unique thing that you've done to not just mitigate, but provide value to your family and other families as well. Well, gang, this has been the Lead Ministry Podcast. We are grateful that you're here. Happy holidays to you and yours, and we will catch you guys on the next one.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Lead Ministry Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and visit leadvolunteers.com for more episodes and resources. Thanks for listening.